Kimberly Akimbo, the 5-time Tony Award-winning Best Musical, is returning to the Twin Cities. Kimberly navigates the ups and downs of growing up and growing old, though not necessarily in that order. It's a beautiful roller coaster that's very funny and extremely moving. It's perfect for fans of musical theater like Dear Evan Hansen and Come From Away, or for fans of quirky comedies and indie films like Juno and Napoleon Dynamite. It's on stage at the Ordway February 24th through March 1st. Tickets are at ordway.org.
This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about.
Before we start our episode today, we wanted to share a message from the wife of Renee Macklin Good. Renee Macklin Good was fatally shot by an ICE agent on Wednesday of last week. This statement comes from Becca Good, her wife, and it was shared with NPR News. First, I want to extend my gratitude to all the people who have reached out from across the country and around the world to support our family. This kindness of strangers is the most fitting tribute because if you ever encountered my wife, Renee Nicole Macklin Good, you know that above all else, she was kind. In fact, kindness radiated out of her. Renee sparkled. She literally sparkled. I mean, she didn't wear glitter, but I swear she had sparkles coming out of her pores all the time. You might think it was just my love talking, but her family said the same thing. Renee was made of sunshine. Renee lived by an overarching belief. There is kindness in the world, and we need to do everything we can to find it where it resides and nurture it where it needs to grow. Renee was a Christian who knew that all religions teach the same essential truth. We are here to love each other, care for each other, and keep each other safe and whole. Like people have done across place and time, we moved to make a better life for ourselves. We chose Minnesota to make our home. Our whole extended road trip here, we held hands in the car while our son drew all over the windows to pass the time and the miles. What we found when we got here was a vibrant and welcoming community. We made friends and spread joy. And while any place we were together was home, there was a strong shared sense here in Minneapolis that we were looking out for each other. Here I had finally found peace and safe harbor. That has been taken from me forever. We were raising our son to believe that no matter where you come from or what you look like, all of us deserve compassion and kindness. Renee lived this belief every day. She is pure love. She is pure joy. She is pure sunshine. On Wednesday, January 7th, we stopped to support our neighbors. We had whistles. They had guns. Renee leaves behind 3 extraordinary children. The youngest is just 6 years old and already lost his father. I am now left to raise our son and to continue teaching him as Renee believed that there are people building a better world for him. That the people who did this had fear and anger in their hearts, and we need to show them a better way. We thank you for the privacy you are granting our family as we grieve. We thank you for ensuring that Renee's legacy is one of kindness and love. We honor her memory by living her values, rejecting hate and choosing compassion, turning away from fear and pursuing peace, refusing division and knowing we must come together to build a world where we all come home safe to the people we love. Now we'll start the episode. Today we are covering some of the lingering questions that might be rolling around in your brain this weekend after the tragic events of last week. We'll also find out about a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reshape one of the Twin Cities' most iconic stretches of road. Today I'm joined by CityCast producer Tiffany Bui and Winter Keefer. Winter, you're a celebrated local journalist and a CityCast contributor, and it's been a couple weeks since you've been on the show. And you know what? You picked a hell of a time to come back. This is not like it's not a top 5 chicken wings day. We are doing some serious stuff, and we're recording this before a weekend where a lot could change in the Twin Cities. We're going to get a lot of headlines before this thing comes out. But one thing I always find, Winter, when there is big news, and of course there's been so much big news in the Twin Cities, is I have those lingering questions. I've read 15 headlines. I've read 4 articles. I've listened to 2 podcasts. And at 10 p.m. when I'm cleaning the dishes, I think of something. I think of a lingering question that will be worthwhile to answer in even a couple days from the moment I'm thinking it. And that's what I'm hoping we can do, is covering some lingering questions as we go through this crisis in the Twin Cities, which is really at this point a national crisis. Winter, can I hit you with a couple of sort of these lingering questions and sort of glean some things from you?
Absolutely, Sean. That's what's on my mind too. So looking forward to diving in.
Let's glean. All right. ICE agents went to Roosevelt High School on Wednesday. I heard that while I was driving around town on Minnesota Public Radio, and I thought, that can't be right. I both think it just is morally wrong to go to enforce immigration at a high school, at a place of learning. But I also thought there was actually some legal protections. And it turns out one of my lingering questions is, there used to be, but there's not. So can you tell me about some of these off-limit zones that are no longer off-limits?
Yeah, absolutely. So, last year at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a policy that was in place that was rescinded. It was called the sensitive zone policy, which included institutions like schools, religious institutions, women's centers, healthcare, things like that were protected from ICE for a while, as far as, being able to be on that property and detaining people. That is not the case anymore. The policy was created in 2011 and expanded in 2021. And the only way ICE could enter these designated zones was in the case of something like a threat of terrorism or imminent risk of death. This obviously was rescinded, and we're seeing the effects of that a year later. That's why this could happen at a Minneapolis public schools building. Seeing that resounding effect, it hits home for us here. And, I also was thinking about how the news cycle goes. This was the same day that Renee Good was shot and killed. And so as we're seeing schools shut down, it's easy for that to get lost in the news cycle too. But as of today, schools have been reopened for MPS, and I think that there's going to be a lot of fear that lingers, and rightfully so, when you have a policy like this no longer exist in places that once were safe.
You spend time thinking that you really hope your kids are safe when they're at school, and you can imagine being a parent and feeling like maybe my kids are safest at school, given what's happening in a city like Minneapolis in general. And then suddenly you go, there is no safety anywhere in this child's life, and it's heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking to see that these laws. I don't know if they were changed under the cloak of night or not, but I did not hear about this as a big story, and now we're paying the price, and paying the price of missing out on days of education, which is just frankly a smaller part than safety, but it is something where it goes, there's things to learn those Thursday and Friday, and it was not available to students in Minneapolis public schools.
Right. Well, and the goal of the policy itself was to protect undocumented immigrants from losing access to essential services like education. And I think another piece with this happening at a school district and having a resident shot and killed by ICE is that we're not just talking about people being afraid of being detained. We're talking about people being afraid of what happens during that interaction, and thinking about that when it involves your children, I can't even imagine.
Let's get to another lingering question that a lot of folks are rolling around in their brain. In fact, I talked to a couple lawyers about this on our Friday episode, but there was some really nice reporting from Shadi Bushra in MnPost. And the basic question is, can local police charge federal law enforcement with crimes? That's lingering in my brain, Winter. It doesn't happen all that often, but can it happen? That's really the questions I want to have answered.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of my first questions on Wednesday. And the answer is yes. Yes, local institutions can charge federal officers with crimes, but it might be difficult, especially under the current administration. That's kind of the overall takeaway from his article. Federal officers have some special legal protections, but they're not immune from state and local prosecution. So that's kind of the overarching answer to the question. But, just Thursday, we learned that the U.S. Attorney's Office removed local investigators with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension from the investigation of the case, leaving it solely with the FBI, that's pretty major because that means that the BCA no longer has access to case materials around the shooting itself. So that complicates things too. One thing I've seen over and over again when it comes to an officer shooting a person is that you don't want the investigator of that to be the institution that committed the act. And so when you have the feds solely as the investigators of that internal case, it is something that should draw a question. And that is the case across the board whenever we have something like this happen.
Yeah, Winter, I'm sure you and everyone else can't help but think about the trial of Derek Chauvin. And obviously, there are pretty significant differences here, him being a federal officer, as you mentioned, but also the bar to just sue a police officer is already so high. Something that Shadi reported was that he talked to a lawyer, Robert Bennett, from Robbins Kaplan LLP, who represented a victim of former police officer Derek Chauvin as well. And he said that the Chauvin cases were an example of how state and the feds can work together to prosecute these cases if they want to. And Bennett told Shadi that based on, Trump's comments and Secretary Noem's comments, there's probably not going to be a federal prosecution, which is very staggering. I believe Chauvin faced state and federal charges. Winter, what do you think, besides conflict of interest, is the importance of having the case in the BCA's hands?
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important point, Tiffany. I think that it does show, that this is political. When it came to the investigation of Derek Chauvin, it was really primarily under the Biden administration. That's where it is just inherently political, no matter what time it is. But in general, I would just say that the importance of having a jurisdiction outside of the one that committed the act is always just conflict of interest. It's basic. I think that can be a bipartisan take if you really think about it. Do you want somebody, investigating themselves? There's no unbiased investigation into something that is investigated by those who committed it.
Gotcha. So conflict of interest is actually really the heart of the issue. And now you have state and federal enforcement working with different information as of right now.
Vastly different. And I mean, what we're seeing now, too, is that it's become such a political ploy across the nation where you have, Kristi Noem and you have Donald Trump painting a picture that is different than what people are seeing with their own two eyes through video footage, which, is a little bit, reminiscent of George Floyd, where the first news release that came out after George Floyd's murder said he died of a medical incident, and then you have a video, and so that's a parallel, but it's how people want to interpret that video or skew what people have seen that will really impact this investigation too, and when it comes to public perception. But it is political, We also have midterms coming up, and we have Trump admitting already that he's concerned about potential impeachment depending on how those go. This is sort of a pivotal political moment as well, and unfortunately that also plays a role in objective prosecution and investigation.
When we're talking about things lingering in our head, Winter, I think that for anyone, especially those of us who lived in the Twin Cities in 2020, there's a lot of echoes happening in what's happening in 2026 here in Minneapolis. I'm still in that phase of denial, or at least I was a handful of hours ago, where I had a very non-stressful afternoon running around going to record stores, giving away tickets for a First Avenue thing. And I was going, oh, I'm Sean. I'm a fancy boy who drives around to record stores and gives away tickets. And then realizing as I'm driving around and I'm listening to NPR, I'm going, that's not what these next couple weeks are about. And it's, if I could press a button and go, I hope history is not made in Minneapolis in January of 2026, I would press that button. But it's back, right? We are on front pages across the nation. A bunch of folks are throwing out what they planned on covering and talking about this. I want to ask you this question. I also hope to actually hear also from Tiffany about this. But Winter, you didn't live in Minneapolis in 2020, but you were living in Flint, Michigan, and already connecting a lot with this story. And now you've spent many, many years as a journalist in Minneapolis. Knowing what you know now, how would you operate differently in 2020 and the years afterwards?
I think that being outside of Minneapolis during the murder of George Floyd, it showed how much major events like this reverberate through every community. I was in Flint, Michigan, and that community had the general message of we don't have anything left to burn when it came to protests. And that doesn't mean that there weren't protests. It was months, and it should have been. It was something that connected so deeply with the nation as a whole. But, I also observe, as somebody who's been in cities that have had major events like the water crisis happen, the way that people talk about these major events in areas outside of where they happen versus the way that they're talked about in the areas where they do is staggering. It's majorly different. And so I think that my overall takeaway is that people should be watching Minneapolis and its people, and that is something that we see the strength of Minneapolis and the Twin Cities metro as a whole happening right now, where people know how to gather and how to congregate and how to watch their neighbors. And that is a really powerful and strong thing. And so I guess I would tell winter of 2020 to watch the people here, to be tuned into the local media here and the podcasts here and the people who are talking about it as people who are impacted by it, people who are grieving their neighbors, people who are protecting their neighbors. I think that should always be the base drive of people who are looking from the outside in, is to look through the eyes of the people who are here.
Tiffany, from what you've learned, how are you going to navigate this differently than you navigated the events of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it still feels very much the same, even though I'm coming out of it with hindsight from 2020. Hindsight is 2020, literally. I'm hearing helicopters above my apartment, like near my apartment, pretty constantly. Parts of Uptown are boarded up again. It feels very eerily similar to that time. But I think, like Winter mentioned, we've been with it. Like the networks that existed that popped up in 2020 before that, the mutual aid, the organizing, the alert system, those are all now up and running in the community here. I think for myself, if Winter wants to pay attention to the community and what they're doing, I also want to pay attention to the truth and how different people are disseminating it. I think in a different way, right-wing media has tried to rewrite the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and they are trying to rewrite that now. But the video doesn't lie. Like you can see propaganda being created in real time, but also now there's a video, just like with George Floyd, there's a video, and you can decide for yourself what actually happened. There will be people who won't want to watch the video. There will be people who will still want to listen to YouTubers like Nick Shirley, but there are other people who know with their own eyes what they saw. And that's not something you can take away from people anymore.
I would add just that I think in times like this, to remember that the community is so deeply impacted by events like this. I think I would certainly advise that people stay together and in community more than ever, because it's so healing to do so. And that you have to always remember that you're no good to anybody if you're exhausted. And so just recognizing that wider impact that people are feeling deeply in our community, and they're scared, and that we need to be taking care of each other as best we can.
Sage advice, and very hard to follow, but very worthwhile to follow. Winter, I think you are done for the episode, so I just want to give you a big thank you, a welcome back to CityCast in 2026. I hope next time we're talking about chicken wings, but I really appreciate what you brought to this conversation, and you have a lot of knowledge in this world, and you shared a lot of it. So thank you so much for being with us today, Winter.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Tiffany. You guys are doing great work, and hold in there, take care of yourselves, do the thing that's hard to do.
We'd love to hear from you. What questions are lingering in your brain? Send us a text or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline. That's 612-217-0637. We'd love to answer those questions in an upcoming mailbag segment. There's more to discuss. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Want to give you a heads up about a thrilling new adventure fantasy book that was just released called The Ascent by Christopher Walker from Vermont. It follows John Atwater, a retired Army veteran who falls through a magical door and finds himself in the mystical world of Morelia. In order to get home, he must ascend the mountainous island that stands in front of him and usurp the oppressive ruler of this strange new world. This book has all the elements of a great fantasy novel. Thrilling action sequences, magical creatures, betrayals, romance, compelling storylines, poetic justice, and even humorous exchanges by relatable characters. So go to ChristopherWalkerBooks.com and click on the Buy Now dropdown to purchase The Ascent in paperback, hardcover, or ebook formats. Recent reading scores have shown about half of Minnesotan kids are reading at grade level. As a community, we can work together to make sure all kids get the support they need to become lifelong readers. Reading Partners is a Twin Cities-based nonprofit that trains community volunteers to work one-on-one with elementary-aged children. More than simply reading with a child, our volunteers follow a proven, structured curriculum to help students learn specific skills necessary to become proficient readers. No experience is required. 1 hour a week is all it takes to make an impact. Reading Partners needs more volunteer tutors to pair with students before February. Learn more and sign up at readingpartners.org/volunteer. Now we're going to do a quick producer swapperoo here. So thank you so much, Tiffany Bui, for being with us. And now we're going to welcome in Wyndham Park's own Adam Sage for this next segment. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Sean, glad to talk about Northeast stuff. I love Northeast.
Well, we love your enthusiasm for Northeast, and there's going to be a lot of future-facing stuff that's going to be exciting to talk about with Seth Stattmiller, who is one of the owners of Recovery Bike Shop. So first off, Seth, welcome to CityCast. We're glad to have you here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, because it's 2026, we can't talk about 2028 and the future of an art walk on Central Ave right away. We actually first want to talk about the crisis that is happening across the Twin Cities and across the country right now, and certainly heavily on Central Ave, where there's been a lot of ICE activity. And Seth, I believe you were in the aftermath of an ICE action that involved you actually caring for a dog. Can you talk a little bit about what happened to you late last week?
I was at Momo Cafe and I got a call that ICE was in front of the bike shop. And this happened just down the street from the shop. And I got there as ICE was driving up Central. So I missed the arrest, but 2 observers were arrested right in front of our shop. And their dog, one of their dogs was abandoned in their car. And the community was standing around afterwards trying to figure out what to do, and everybody went into action. And here's something we could do, and we got the dog out of the car, and he lived with us at Recovery Bike Shop all day until the observer was released from ICE custody.
Seth, thank you for sharing that. Also, thank you for finding a way to make a difference. I think a lot of times folks are struggling with this idea of how can I make an impact? And then you realize I can take care of this dog. This dog won't be cold. These constitutional observers can know that their dog is being taken care of until they get back there. That's one of those opportunities where you make a huge impact in a single day. And on a completely different scale, there are these opportunities to make a huge impact once a generation, or even less frequently than that, with something like updating how a street is going to function in a neighborhood. MnDOT has plans to reconstruct Central Avenue in 2028. But of course, start planning, start talking about it in 2026 and even earlier. So the Northeast Minneapolis Arts District has this opportunity to not only have some changes coming in from MnDOT, but perhaps have folks like Seth Stattmiller and other fixtures in the community step up and turn this into something that would look more like what it is. It is an incredible arts district, but It's also sometimes a parking lot full of cars as you're trying to get to wherever you're trying to get to. And you're the owner, one of the owners of Recovery Bike Shop. And I just want to ask you, as we know Central Ave today, what do you want to see change in installing this art walk and this redesign plan that is proposed for the future years?
Yeah, we are facing a possible 3-year reconstruction of Central Avenue. Like you say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, once in a century sometimes. And Central Avenue is a state highway. It is literally a state highway. It is 7 lanes of cars right now. 2 of those are parking lanes. 1 of those is a turn lane. But it is wall-to-wall cars. It's 100 feet of pavement, including sidewalks and boulevards, and even the boulevard is paved. It's a hostile place for pedestrians. It's a hostile place for walking just because of the traffic. And our customers come to our businesses or come to our neighbors' businesses. We have these amazing businesses like Francis Burger Joint and Holy Land and Eastside Co-op that have a draw from far away, from the suburbs, and people drive in, but they want to get as close as they can to their destination so that they can get in and get out. They don't want to park down the street because it's just no fun to walk on Central Avenue. So we want to make Central Avenue a place for people. We're in America's best arts district, according to USA Today polls. And we have an opportunity like no other city in the country with this reconstruction to do something incredible. This should be our Chicago Bean. This should be our St. Louis Arch. This should be our Eiffel Tower. This is our chance to create the draw that we know we can do. And so I want to activate Central Avenue. I want to create a bustling corridor for the neighborhood, for our people, for the arts district, for the businesses on Central Avenue, of which I am one, and for our community, for Minneapolis, for the country. If this is good enough, people will put this on their list and they will come here to see Central Avenue.
So Minnesota Department of Transportation has put forward a plan for the reconstruction, and you've also put forward a plan for Art Walk. And looking at both of the designs, they look really similar. Can you tell us, like, what's the difference between the Art Walk plan and the one from MnDOT?
Yeah, this is a really important question. There are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. Parking is the first thing on everybody's list, and the Art Walk does not disrupt parking. We think the Art Walk is actually a parking solution. If we can turn Central Avenue into a destination in its entirety, then people will feel much more comfortable parking along the whole avenue. We don't actually have a parking problem. We have a parking perception problem. There is always parking. There's always a spot somewhere on Central Avenue. You just need to feel comfortable getting from that spot to your destination. So logistically, we want to widen the boulevard on one side of the street.
And by that, you mean like the sidewalk walking area?
Well, there's the sidewalk and then there's the boulevard between the sidewalk and the curb. Where
that's where like trees go?
Trees. Right now it's paved with bricks. Okay. If you're in a typical single family neighborhood, it's usually grass and trees. That's what we're referring to as the boulevard.
Gotcha.
So that's 7 feet right now. We need 10 feet so that we can install permanent art pieces as well as host market stalls weekly and have art fairs and makers markets and all kinds of things to really activate that space. It's sort of the amenity zone from a MnDOT perspective. MnDOT has all of these pieces, the sidewalks, the boulevards, bike lanes, a dedicated bus lane, car lanes, turn lanes. They're all in this puzzle. And we're asking for most of those pieces to be shrunk by 6 inches in most cases so that we can stack all of those 6 inches against the boulevard on the west side of Central Avenue, giving us the space to do all of these wonderful things that will really have the power to transform Central Avenue, transform the Arts District, and transform Minneapolis.
Top 2 wonderful things. Like, if you want to put in wonderful things, give me some details. Like, give me 6 inches and I'll do wonderful things. What's wonderful?
So the first thing we're doing, we're installing Barrel Boy on the side of Recovery Bike Shop. Barrel Boy is going to be this giant sculpture by artist Joel Sisson climbing the side of Recovery Bike Shop like King Kong. It's going to be amazing. Very excited. The neighborhood is helping us pay for that. They're excited. But specifically in that space, I think we can do weekly markets. I think we can really activate that space. I think we can slow traffic down. If you have art in that space, you create an engaging street. Engaged drivers are more aware of their speed and they slow down. I think we're going to have permanent art pieces in that space, but then we're going to have street murals painted on the pavement. We have some art pieces now. I think this will put that on steroids. I want this to sort of, drip out into the neighborhood after we start putting pieces on Central Avenue. It's such a visible space. We have 25,000 cars a day driving down Central Avenue, and I don't think most of them know that they're in America's best arts district. They should know that. It's the front door of the arts district. It should be the red carpet of the arts district, and people should feel like it's their red carpet, that they can stop and walk this avenue and experience this art and get inspired by the resources that we have, this asset that we have in Northeast Minneapolis.
So you mentioned 25,000 cars a day and also slowing down traffic, which in an article in the Northeaster back in September was actually a concern cited by some other business owners on Central. Specifically, Football Pizza was concerned about slowing down traffic, resulting in less customers. And Eastside Food Co-op seemed to be concerned about making the lanes a little bit skinnier, citing diminishing space available to cars, buses, bikes, and pedestrians. And I'm curious if you have been having conversations with these other businesses on Central that are not in agreement with you and how those conversations are going.
We have been having conversations. I would not say people are not in agreement. I think they're curious and they're concerned. Parking is always the first thing on a business owner's mind. And so we have that conversation a lot. We're not asking for anything that MnDOT is not already planning for when it comes to traffic calming. MnDOT is really trying to turn this into a safer corridor. We're also, because it's a trunk highway, we're going to have semis on that avenue. We're going to have buses on that avenue. MnDOT's talking about a dedicated bus lane, which is a good thing. There's still going to be a lot of pavement there. And any lane that is big enough for a semi is going to be plenty big enough for the customer traffic that our businesses need. I depend as Recovery Bike Shop on those cars and that business. I don't want to see that traffic turned off either.
We want to hear from you. Send us a text, leave us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline, 612-217-0637. There's more to discuss. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Seth, I have my sort of skeptic questions here for you, so put on your defender hat for a moment.
Absolutely. First
off, you said a little bit earlier, you were like, art will slow down traffic. Back that up, because I just feel like you can't walk into any room. If I say like eggs will create sunlight, somebody go, you got to explain that. Like, yeah, how will art slow down traffic?
What I'm saying is that engagement slows down traffic. Ambiguity slows down traffic. If you're on the freeway, there is nothing to impede your brain. You have long, straight, clear, wide lanes so that you can just go fast. The advantage of an engaging street is that it activates drivers' brains. It takes them out of their, zoning out and just going. It takes them out of point A to point B driving and gets them thinking about what's going on. The best thing to calm traffic is people. The thing that drivers are most afraid of is encountering a person in their driving experience. So if we just have people walking on the street, not in the street, but walking adjacent to the street, and there are human beings around and in that space, that slows cars down. So creating a driving environment that has sort of just interesting things on it, creates engagement from a driver's perspective, and gets them thinking about the environment that they're driving in, and they slow down.
To my knowledge, I don't know if I've been to an art walk before. If we say we need a bike lane, people might disagree, but we all kind of understand what a bike lane is. How do you understand what an art walk is, and where have you seen it succeed in America?
Yeah, that is the best question. That was my favorite question.
Take that, Adam. You hear that?
Yeah.
Best question. Sean McPherson.
Because these are great spaces. The first example I cite is Eau Claire. Their art walk, they call the sculpture tour, is 130 odd sculptures that are pretty uniform. Most of them are like 6 feet tall. They sit on a pedestal and it's placed right next to the curb. There might be 2 on a block, maybe 3 on a block at most. And that has been phenomenally successful. Their businesses support the art walk. It is now the #1 reason people visit Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They have 700 artists a year fighting for, I think, 40 spots. They do a big festival every year launching the new thing. You know, it is just like changed Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And it's 2, 3 foot by 3 foot spaces on a block all over town. It is very minimal, and it has transformed Eau Claire.
I'm curious, like you said, you're on the Hennepin County Active Transportation Council that put forward a resolution. Committee put forward a resolution on it. And MnDOT is actively comparing plans. They have some kind of deadline coming up to lock something in. What's happening next?
So there is some urgency to this. MnDOT is in charge of this project. They have to design it first. Design goes through 3 or 4 phases. Once design reaches 30%, they're kind of carving this thing in stone. And after 30%, it gets very difficult to make changes. The 30% mark is coming up soon. Our information says that it is coming this month in January. So we need our local politicians to be communicating with MnDOT that this is important to the people of Minneapolis and important to the city. MnDOT is going to come to the city of Minneapolis and sort of check in a process called municipal consent. And they're going to ask Minneapolis if they have any feedback on MnDOT's proposed design. City Council is going to vote on the Central Avenue reconstruction. We need our city council members to know that this is important to Minneapolis and for them to say to MnDOT at municipal consent, hey, let's put in an art walk.
Seth, you are dreaming big. I want to say optimistically, it seems like MnDOT is dreaming pretty big even without your addendums. And that's welcome news. But thank you, for seeming to just be a really great part of your community, even with the other business owners that you might have maybe not conflict with, but just differences about, what you're hoping to happen. Thank you for building that consensus. Thank you for what you're doing at this time of crisis. And frankly, thank you for taking time to talk about it with CityCast.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Thank you for having this conversation.
That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. Seth Stattmiller, Winter Keefer, Tiffany Bui, Adam Sage. Thanks for being here today. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with somebody who's been to Burning Man? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.